Over the past number of months, we have heard news of James Harden taking a $15 million pay cut so that his team, the Philadelphia 76ers, could bolster up their roster. We have also heard that he's getting into better shape. We have also heard that he doesn't feel like he is past his prime. We have also heard that this is the 76ers' best shot at a championship and that it is potentially their year. And while these are exactly the words you want to hear from James Harden and the team, that's all they are, words. And that is all the Sixers have to show for over the past number of seasons. Fans have expected and the team has promised and promised, but to no avail. When things appear to have potential, you are usually left with nothing but disappointment. The difficult part about being a Sixers fan is the constant disappointment year in and year out. And to save myself from feeling terrible after another early, inevitable postseason exit, I try to just expect the disappointment and catch it early. And I'm usually right. And it helps to not feel as aggravated with the constant shortcomings. And this whole story starts with the process. After Wilt Chamberlain, Julius Erving, and Moses Malone, along with many others, Allen Iverson was Philadelphia's superstar player. He was loved and embraced in the city maybe as much as any player in any sport ever. He led them to the finals, won MVP, and put up several impressive seasons with the Sixers. But nothing lasts forever. Years removed from Allen Iverson, the team was looking for its next superstar and was looking to get back to being competitive. Andre Iguodala was left as the team's best player, as a decent to good scorer and defensive guy who had some nice dunks, but that was about it. Andrew Bynum was sent to Philly before the 2011-12 year, but he would have season-ending surgery before the season even started, and Iggy played his last season with the team this year after 8 seasons. In the 2012-13 season, the 76ers were a 34-48 ninth seed led by Jrue Holiday, the team's leading scorer and assist man and a defensive guard. Holiday was an all-star for the one and only time in his career this season, and for yet another season, the team was just okay. Not nearly good enough to compete, but also too good for a high draft pick, stuck in mediocrity. So in comes the process. The Philadelphia 76ers brought in Sam Hinkie as general manager with the plan to unstuck the franchise from the worst place to be. The idea of the process was to basically become as terrible as possible by trading away key contributors and bringing in team-friendly contracts to climb higher in the draft lottery in search of a franchise-changing superstar, something that has been a part of the NBA for decades and is still used to this day for teams with hopes of something greater. Philadelphia may have brought it to a new level, and being a huge market, they were crucified by many for this intentional plummet in wins. After Jrue Holiday's All-Star season in 2013, he was traded to kick things off. With him being a good player, he had to go. He was the last thing the Sixers wanted. He didn't really match the organization's pursuits of all-time bottom-of-the-barrel play. So he was gone in the 2013 offseason and traded to New Orleans. Coach Doug Collins was replaced with Brett Brown and the team was on a new path, and the all-time tanking job really began. And just like that, they were one of the worst teams in the NBA. Tanking isn't the most honorable thing you can do, but you have to cut Hinkie some slack and commend him for his efforts to at least some extent. He was trying to do something. He planned to move this team away from nothingness. I suppose pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and just going to get it is an option, but very unlikely in this league. And staying just okay gets you nowhere. Pick a side and stick to it, and being honest with yourself and your organization is important. The beginning of the process gave Philly a chance to acquire a generational talent, maybe even their next Iverson. And it did give the franchise 2 pieces that put them in a much better position than they were in beforehand, but not without a few failures first. Now I can understand that no organization is going to shoot 100%. Everyone is going to make some mistakes. The NBA draft is essentially a gamble. A player can dominate the college scene and then not pan out, even if they seem like the very obvious and great pick at the time. There's really no way of knowing for sure who's going to be who, even 2 years in advance, and it is essentially a guessing game, and so many guess wrong. The first couple picks of the process were in 2013. Pick number 6 acquired from the Jrue Holiday trade, and with the 11th pick that same year, the Philadelphia 76ers drafted Michael Carter-Williams out of Syracuse. His first game was against the reigning champion Miami Heat, and he had the game of a lifetime against basketball's best team. He showed some real promise and would take home the Rookie of the Year trophy this season. It seemed to be a great start to the process, but just as fast as it started, it ended, and MCW was traded to the Milwaukee Bucks after only 1.5 seasons in Philly, and he's never even come close to reaching any potential that he might have had, and he's just bounced around the league ever since. The team's sixth pick turned out to be the center out of Kentucky, Nerlens Noel. Noel missed his entire first season with a knee injury. He was the sixth pick, but never was anything more than just a role player. He played for some seasons, then he was gone too. Jahlil Okafor was a post-scoring big man drafted 3rd overall in 2015 out of Duke University that just did not match the direction the league was going in. As a traditional big, he didn't do much besides play back to the basket. He averaged 17 and 7 year one, not bad, but the same year the three-point shooting Golden State Warriors began setting a new standard for the league with the more fast-paced run-and-gun play style. Okafor's slower-paced game simply did not fit in the modern NBA, and he was gone after 2.5 seasons with the Sixers, and is out of the league right now. After no one really panned out for the Philadelphia 76ers, they had yet another chance, and yet another lottery pick in 2017, which turned out to be 1st overall. 3 prospects stood out from the rest: Jason Tatum from Duke, Lonzo Ball from UCLA, and Markelle Fultz from Washington. Looking to add another young player in addition to the ones from the 2014 and 2016 drafts, the team brought in Markelle Fultz. 23 points, 6 assists, 6 rebounds as a freshman. Fultz shot above 40% from 3, and it seemed like the Sixers potentially drafted another young star to round out the big 3. The Sixers could be excited for a player of this caliber coming to the franchise to help push them in the right direction. Quickly though, Markelle became another rookie that just didn't pan out for the team. He went from 40+% from 3 in college to under 50% from the free throw line in the NBA. From future NBA star to NBA bust, he wasn't able to do anything to the same level that he did in college. His jump shot was completely ruined, and no one knew why. He was eventually traded to Orlando for basically nothing. As you can see, the 76ers draft history is very flawed, and we can think about what teams could have been if they picked differently. And although we could definitely criticize the franchise for these decisions to start the process, hindsight is 20/20, and again, every team makes mistakes. But the extreme tanking did result in 2 players joining the franchise that helped turn around everything, which was the whole goal of the process. And this is one of the positives you can point to in the midst of all the disappointment that the 76ers have caused their fans and honestly themselves in the last decade. And after looking at a lot of their drafting mistakes, they have also made a couple of great franchise-saving decisions. Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons helped to turn around the 76ers franchise, and although the team had a lot of lottery picks that turned into failed situations, these 2 players gave fans a reason to keep their eyes on Philly for the first time in a long time, and honestly turned the franchise around. And having these 2 guys wouldn't be possible without Sam Hinkie's all gas no brakes tanking strategy. Drafted in 2014, Joel Embiid had injury problems. He missed his first 2 seasons with a foot injury, and people started to raise some eyebrows and question if the 3rd overall pick could fulfill his potential, or if he would become another injury-prone player that eventually just fizzled out. The 76ers needed a guy to come out and help the organization truly get back on their feet. You need stars in this league. Mediocre will not cut it past maybe a first-round exit, and the Sixers got their guy with Embiid. After finally playing after missing his first 2 full seasons, his impressive rookie year in the 2016-17 season, Embiid gave the Sixers hope that they hadn't seen in a while. They still didn't make the playoffs, but they were moving in the right direction with a player that could potentially lead their franchise, and heads started turning towards the city of brotherly love. They accomplished their goal, and they continued their rise from the NBA gutters when they acquired yet another lottery pick in 2016, which happened to be the 1st pick. The Philadelphia 76ers had yet another chance to acquire a generational talent. Along with everyone else, they had their eye on the 6'10" point forward coming out of LSU, with the ability to attack the rim with a surprising agility and athleticism, while showing a gift to playmake and being a dominant force on the boards, with tons of defensive capability and potential. Ben Simmons was picked 1st overall to the Philadelphia 76ers. Simmons will go on to miss his first season in the NBA with a foot injury, but he stepped onto the court into the 2017-18 season, this also being Markelle Fultz's rookie year. And while Markelle was disappointing fans of the NBA, and especially of the Sixers, Ben immediately showed why he was the 1st overall pick. With an already promising versatile game, Ben drew comparisons to some of the greatest to ever play the game. NBA experts declared he was the next Magic Johnson or LeBron James, or even both players combined. And at the time, this felt like a more than fair comparison, and maybe it even still has some truth. The 76ers' next superstar took home the NBA Rookie of the Year trophy, which was controversial for many. This new duo helped the Sixers to the playoffs for the first time in 6 years, and their first 50-win season in 17 years, in the 2017-18 season. The 2018 76ers was a good team, and a gigantic breath of fresh air after the fans of the franchise got used to seeing their favorite team attempt to climb out of the gutters. Of course, you had your two main young stars in Embiid and Simmons, but the role players were also great. To round out the starting lineup, we had guys like Dario Saric, JJ Redick, and Robert Covington, players that added versatility, shooting, and defense to the team. TJ McConnell was a big piece off the bench, and as the season went on, guys like Ersan Ilyasova and Marco Bellinelli were added to the roster, guys who helped to space the floor and knock down the three ball for Simmons and Embiid. Philadelphia earned the 3rd seed in the regular season. They would go on to eliminate the Miami Heat in the first round of the postseason 4-1. Then they would go on to be eliminated in the second round 4-1 by the Boston Celtics. And in Game 2, Ben Simmons had just 1 point. The team's first playoff appearance in 6 years was disappointing, and they were out of the playoffs way sooner than they would have hoped for. But they were young and had a lot of years to get better. They finally turned their franchise around, and some potential superstar talents seemed to have them on a clear path to series championship contention. But the 76ers roster makeover and burst of potential became a situation with a lot of questions, and fast. And every organization has questions and concerns, but the controversy and drama in Philly started to grow and grow. After the early 2018 postseason exit, the Philadelphia 76ers started to go downhill after their much-needed uprise. And this is the saddest era of this near decade-long story, the era that bred my disdain for this franchise due to constantly being let down by the team and front office at times. After their first playoff appearance in way too long, the team started off pretty regular, 15 games into the 2019-20 season. They were 9-6. Then looking to move closer to true title contention, which should be the only goal, the front office made a great decision. Robert Covington, Dario Saric, and Jared Bayless, plus a 2022 second-round pick, were all traded to Minnesota for star Jimmy Butler. Some good players gone, but you can accept that if you're getting a star in return that can really move the needle. Out the gate, Butler hit 2 game winners within 8 days. This was great to see. Butler showed his 76ers teammates and fans alike they can trust him in the late moments of a game. Butler also showed a grittiness that other stars don't, and he's a great defender, a great addition for this team led by 2 young guys. As the season went on, the 76ers began to win more and more with their new addition and leader. Through 54 games, the team was 34-20, and on the other coast, a player by the name of Tobias Harris was creating buzz in LA. Harris was averaging 21 points and 8 rebounds for the LA Clippers, and with a player of this caliber being available for trade, the Sixers jumped on the opportunity and acquired yet another star, bolstering their roster further. Ben Simmons, JJ Redick, Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid, with Brett Brown, who was coaching, was in question, and a lot of that actually came from Jimmy Butler. But with a mix of scoring and defense, this starting 5 was stacked. Philly had 2 young stars plus older star veterans with experience and a sniper. They finished the season 51-31 with another 3rd seed, got past the Brooklyn Nets with relative ease, then met the 2019 Raptors in the second round. Battling throughout the whole series, back and forth, they fought to a 3-3 standstill with Game 7 in Toronto. But for the second year in a row, the Philadelphia 76ers would fall and lose in the second round. The Raptors unit and Kawhi Leonard's greatness powered their team all the way to having 4 bounces determine their opponent's fate. As the series went on, Ben Simmons seemed to be increasingly useless on the offensive end, averaging just 11 points. His lack of a jump shot was becoming more prevalent and more of a problem. And honestly, the offense as a whole was in question. Joel Embiid also didn't play too well during the series, while Jimmy Butler was the team's best player. But it was time to regroup and try again the next season. Jimmy Butler gave the 76ers a chance to make something special. After gaining Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, Philly rose from NBA poverty, but the addition of Tobias Harris and especially Jimmy Butler brought them to another level, and they came closer than anyone else at knocking out the eventual NBA champs. But after just 1 season with the much appreciated Jimmy Buckets, he was gone and off to Miami. After their heartbreaking loss versus the Toronto Raptors, Jimmy decided that it was time to move on.
When that Kawhi shot went in,
Yeah,
what was going through your head?
a lot was going through my head, man. And so the shot goes in, we go back to the locker room. I'm in awe a little bit. And then after like everything settles down, the first thing that comes to my mind legit is, will I be back here? Will I have an opportunity to do this again with these guys? To tell you the truth, I had a feeling that it would be a no.
Losing Jimmy Butler was a gigantic and destructive loss. He gave them what they needed to go to that next level. For me, losing Butler was one of the first dominoes to fall that led me to losing some faith in this team and in this franchise. They had a good thing going with tons of potential and room to get even better. A squad that could compete for multiple championships, maybe the final stage of the process, and they fumbled. Losing Jimmy Butler seemed to be a combined effort from the team.
Was last year difficult for you?
Yeah.
Not just getting traded, but the whole in the summer, preseason.
Yes. On any given day, me as a person, as a player, I didn't know who the was in charge. I think that was my biggest thing. I didn't know what the to expect whenever I would go into the gym, whenever I go into the plane, whenever I go into the game. I was like, man, I think I was as lost as the next motherfucker.
The lack of structure and leadership played a big part in Jimmy's departure. More incompetence from the Sixers. His issues with Coach Brett Brown in particular played a big part in the star not wearing a Sixers jersey again. Jimmy took issue with the way Brett Brown did things and ran the offense. Brett took the ball out of Ben Simmons' hands in the playoffs, who was used to handling the ball for the whole season. And although Jimmy had more ball handling responsibilities, which you would assume any player would be stoked about, he took issue with this abrupt change as well. But Ben Simmons, Brett Brown, and the 76ers' offensive precariousness did not stop once Jimmy was gone. Going into the 2019 regular season without Jimmy Butler, the 76ers had some new additions, the biggest pickup being Al Horford from Boston. Horford had given Embiid some problems several times in the past, so you have to assume signing the big man was just as much taking him away from Boston as it was signing him for his abilities. It also was probably an attempt to make up for the terrible mistake of losing Jimmy Butler. The team also signed Tobias Harris to a max $180 million contract. They seemed to prioritize this over trying to fight for Butler, or maybe they seemed to already know that their inability to manage their franchise had already burned that bridge completely. Replacing JJ Redick at the 2 guard, who was off to New Orleans, Josh Richardson came in from the Butler trade, and the Sixers kind of just let their best shooter by far walk out the door for a much inferior shooter. The team went from this to this. And just like the past squads, I suppose this team had some potential, but it was so obviously a downgrade. I believed in this team somewhat, but maybe I was just coping. Starting the season strong, the Sixers were 5-0. But as the season went on, problems that plagued the team were still present. A roster that once looked competent started to prove to have some major issues. Bringing in Al Horford was questionable due to age and just how much money he was signed on for, but what he still had in the tank and what he could still provide on the court seemed to make it worth it, at least to me. But him and Embiid's big man duo just didn't work. Horford just wasn't a good enough shooter to have next to Joel, but he also couldn't work too much down low because playing in the post was Embiid's job, and this left Al in a position where he couldn't provide much offensively. Josh Richardson out there as a shooter instead of JJ Redick was detrimental to a team that so desperately needed spacing. You would assume they would fight to keep Redick, but I guess not. This season showed the height of the split of Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons conversation. The fit was never ideal, but they could coexist. But overcoming this non-ideal fit was seeming less and less possible. A lot of that was due to poor roster construction. The media was picking sides, and I remember speaking to my fellow Sixers fans and discussing who Philly should build around. The team went into the playoffs after a very disappointing season. After coming so close to a conference finals and losing many key contributors, this seemed like the end for Philly. Simmons missed the first round versus Boston because he needed knee surgery. After 4 games of Joel Embiid averaging 30 and 12 and Tobias 180 mil, Harris's 16 points a game, the team was swept and eliminated, and the media wasted no time in continuing the conversations of splitting up Philadelphia's saviors, splitting themselves up into different camps. But no matter who you chose as the better option, it was obvious the 76ers were lost. After pretty much hitting rock bottom and continuing to lose faith and patience from the fans, Philadelphia had to make some major changes. It seemed like Jimmy made the right decision to jump ship before things got any worse, because while his old team got swept in the 2020 playoffs, he led his team to the NBA Finals. And Jimmy was also right about Brett Brown, as he was fired and largely blamed for the team's disappointing first-round exit. His coaching had been in question from multiple places for years, and this bad of a loss was a nail in the coffin, and something had to change. Now on the search for a new head coach, the 76ers were looking at three main candidates: Tyronn Lue, Mike D'Antoni, and Doc Rivers. Tyronn Lue helped bring a championship to Cleveland. Mike D'Antoni had a knack for bringing superstar offensive players to their peaks, and Doc Rivers manned the ship for the 2008 Boston Celtics championship team, and that's who they went with. I wanted them to choose Ty Lue because of his coaching for the 2016 Cavaliers, but I definitely didn't want to write Doc off before he had a chance to prove himself. Along with Brett Brown, Al Horford, and Josh Richardson were also gone, and thank God. Their lack of shooting was just one of the issues that killed the team and really took away from Joel Embiid's game, and definitely did not do Ben Simmons any favors, and replacing these two non-shooters with two of the best in the league was huge. And helping with these two additions made during draft night, new president of basketball operations Daryl Morey joined the 76ers just a number of weeks before. And during the same draft, the 76ers brought in Tyrese Maxey out of Kentucky. With new front office members, coaching, and player additions, the team was ready to move on from their disaster of a season. This team's construction was 10 times better than the previous team, with much better spacing with Seth Curry and Danny Green joining the roster. Also, a new coaching change gave the team a new chance. And after these improvements, fans started to grow hopeful. And hope continued when before the season started, there were heavy rumors about a trade that can send an additional star to Philly, with the biggest talk surrounding James Harden. The thought of adding another star to the roster was an exciting idea to entertain, and with Philly fans having no shortage of imagination, minds started running wild. After a second-round exit to the eventual champion LA Lakers, the Houston Rockets in their situation were not doing so hot, and their superstar and franchise player was growing more and more frustrated. But the Sixers would strike out as the former MVP eventually was dealt to Brooklyn, and a lot of people believed the Rockets would not deal Harden to Philly because Daryl Morey had just joined the team and had just left Houston. Nevertheless, a revamped roster in Philly allowed for the team to show a big improvement from just last season. Joel Embiid had the best season of his career by far as one of the top MVP candidates. He showed major improvements in the mid-range area, jumping up 9% and showing a 4.6 increase from 3, with improved handles and with improved passing. And all of this improvement coming from hard work and dedication to his craft helped the big man become virtually unguardable, and we saw a new Embiid. The 5-man quickly rose in the NBA rankings and was an all-star starter. Ben Simmons was making a mark on the court defensively as the team's best defender and was one of the leading defensive player of the year candidates. But offensively, he was still the same player that refused to take a jump shot. And while the retooling of the roster and the improved coaching all brought the team back to being a top seed in the conference, Ben still played best when Embiid was out. And this season we saw Ben have a career-high 42 points with Embiid not on the floor. But the team was back and looked to again have a real chance at a championship, led by a much improved Joel Embiid who worked on his game greatly, rivaling Nikola Jokic for the best center in the league title with a combination of size, power, finesse, and unbelievable skill. The shooters in Curry and Green shot 45 and 40.5% from 3 respectively. Tobias Harris at the 4 over Al Horford was a much better fit next to Embiid, and he was the team's second scorer with his 3-level bucket-getting ability at 6'8". The team finished first in the East, a huge improvement from just one season prior. The team seemed to be back to the regular season winning ways, and this rectification gave Sixers fans expectations of a championship once again going into the playoffs, and it looked like it could be the Sixers' year. Finishing first in the East, the Philadelphia 76ers had the 8th-seeded Washington Wizards round 1, led by Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal. Russ averaged yet another triple-double while Beal was only behind Stephen Curry in points per game. A good duo, but Washington was simply outmatched versus the winningest team in the East. The Sixers went up 3-0 after Embiid's playoff career high 36 points, and just while things seemed to be going according to plan, Embiid suffered a knee injury in Game 4 when the Sixers had a chance to complete the sweep. He was ruled out for the rest of the game with knee soreness, which allowed the Wizards to steal a game. In Game 5, Philly took care of business, finishing the series 4-1, without the superstar big man. The team announced that Embiid had a small lateral meniscus tear in his right knee, an injury he had season-ending surgery for during the 2017 season, and his career-long injury issues continued here. Despite having a torn meniscus, the big man was ready to play in the next round versus the Atlanta Hawks, led by Trae Young. Returning to play despite an injury on his lower body as a 7-footer around 280 pounds. He put his body on the line and didn't lay down despite having great reason to. He knew he was the key to any Sixers success, and he knew this was a pressure-filled chance to win it all. With the 76ers past disappointing playoff exits and the overall unreliability, with some trust in Trae Young and his guys, many NBA fans picked the Hawks to win this series, and you can't really blame them. But Sixers fans knew their team had it in the bag. There was no way this year's Philly team lost to the measly Atlanta Hawks. The teams were gearing up to go into battle with their fans placing their trust into them. Fans of both teams watched closer and closer throughout the series, anticipating their team's victory and advancement into the Eastern Conference Finals, Atlanta's new star point guard leading them to the promised land, and the Sixers had to take advantage of their great regular season. The Hawks took Game 1 with 35 points and 10 assists from Trae Young, rivaling Joel Embiid's 39 points. Game 2 went to Philly behind Embiid's 40 points and 13 rebounds, with 20-plus point games from Tobias Harris and Seth Curry. The 76ers also took Game 3 with a pretty well-balanced effort from the squad, going up 2-1. But Atlanta would go on to tie the series 2 apiece with a 25-18 game from Trae Young and a 4-for-20 performance from Joel Embiid. After a huge revamp of the roster and coaching staff, it was seeming extremely possible that the Philadelphia 76ers could have another early playoff exit. It was clear Atlanta was not just going to roll over. Philly remained hopeful. Joel was putting everything on the line and showed up 3 out of 4 games so far. Ben Simmons' shallow offensive bag was still a huge detriment to the team, and he was ineffective offensively. He was struggling from the free throw line and was struggling to really do anything with the ball at all. In the past, his hesitancy and flat-out unwillingness to take a jump shot was frustrating and seemed to keep him from reaching his full potential, but now he was useless from anywhere in the court. He couldn't even really touch the ball late in the fourth quarters because he would just immediately be wrapped up and fouled, where he would most likely miss the free throws. And even if he did have the ball, he probably wouldn't do much with it. Game 5 in Philadelphia went to Atlanta with yet another monster game from Trae. Another MVP-sized outing from Embiid with 7 threes from Seth Curry down the drain. Game 6, win or go home game for the Sixers, backs against the wall, in Atlanta, the Philly fan base praying not to be disappointed yet again. First quarter, the Sixers were down and Embiid was struggling. Kevin Huerter, a role player on the Hawks, was torching the Sixers while Trae was just carving them up. Tobias Harris was keeping Philadelphia afloat, while Ben, Philly's former first overall pick, was still kind of just there. 4 third-quarter threes from Curry and a more efficient quarter from Embiid had the team up 80-76 going into the final quarter. Getting outplayed for another quarter would mean yet another embarrassing exit for this year's Eastern Conference first seed. The fourth quarter was rough for both teams near the end of this exhausting series. Most of Philly's points came from free throws, and they narrowly came out victorious, bringing the series 3-3. Game 7, playing in Philly. Fans at home and in the Wells Fargo Center waiting for the hometown team to advance to their first conference finals in over 20 years. All of those disheartening losses for this right here. First seed, new coach, MVP caliber year for Embiid, and it was just the measly Atlanta Hawks anyway, right? It was about time for this team to advance past round 2.
Okay, Kevin Huerter. A wild ride this series. Now in Game 7 again, it's Capella. Long 3 on its way. And Trae Young! Ice cold delivers a 3. Your Hawks are headed back to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in 6 years.
This fourth quarter and really this entire series is the perfect illustration for this team and for this story. Coming up short, lack of interest, never quite getting there, disappointment, not reaching expectations, and empty promises. As the Sixers fall once again. Embiid's 11 points in the fourth quarter and a bunch of nothing from everyone else, with 0 shots from Ben Simmons yet again. A pass from Embiid gave him an amazing look right at the basket with only 6-foot Trae Young to stop him, and he passed it. And there you have it. The Atlanta Hawks advanced to the conference finals for the first time since 2015, and the 76ers have yet another early playoff exit. Even after major coaching and on-court upgrades, Philly's finest suffered the same fate, and this was the last straw for Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons' absolutely embarrassing performance in this series was the last straw in the city turning against him and the franchise understanding that this just wasn't going to work. This moment right here was all the franchise and the fans could take. It capped off the culmination of all his bad moments in the city. Simmons was embraced by the city of Philadelphia from the beginning. Fans were ecstatic to have the #1 pick on the team. There was no shortage of hope, and Philly fans really supported Ben throughout everything while he was criticized heavily by most NBA fans. Of course, there were moments of frustration and trashing from the fans, but we were also the first ones to come to his defense. But after years and years of hesitance, disinterest, and what seemed to be fear, everyone knew, and I mean everyone knew, that this was it for the Ben Simmons saga in Philadelphia. The contrast between him and Joel had been interesting to see. Joel is the one who really embraced Philly for the good, the bad, and the ugly, and subsequently has always been loved by the city. Philadelphia fans are some of the most passionate. No player is given a pass for anything. Every athlete will be treated the same. Ben was booed. Embiid was booed. The Eagles are booed when they don't perform as well as the Phillies. You can choose to embrace it and improve, or give up and fold under the spotlight. The reaction to Ben after this series was not some malicious attack on Ben personally, rather how it goes in Philly. Seeing the difference between Embiid and Simmons for this team over the years has been interesting. From some people saying Embiid should be traded and the 76ers should build around Ben, to Joel very clearly being better. One guy took the criticism and improved. The other stayed the exact same throughout it all. One guy always came back and put it on the line. The other guy gave up and threw in the towel. And that is exactly why fans reacted the way that they did to this moment. He brought it upon himself, but everyone else was blamed. Everyone claimed Philly fans ran Ben Simmons out of the city, and that Doc Rivers and Joel Embiid's post-Game 7 comments threw Ben under the bus. When in reality, this was simply the last straw in a very frustrating saga. People seem to remove Ben of any responsibility at all. I guess NBA fans wanted us to continue to coddle Ben Simmons and give him chance after chance. Just shoot the ball, Ben. Okay, fine. Just 1 3 a game? Okay. Mid-range? Okay, fine, just hit your free throws? Alright, maybe not. Fine then, Ben, at the very least dunk the ball when you're open and take advantage of smaller players. Okay, maybe this isn't going to work. Joel Embiid was asked when he believed the turning point was in Game 7. He answered when we had the open shot but came out with 1 point instead, which is correct. Huge momentum killer. Doc Rivers was asked if he believes Ben Simmons can still be the point guard on a championship team. He answered, "I don't know the answer to that question right now. The best way to be honest without completely trashing your player." But these two answers, although the correct answers all things considered, was seen as throwing the point guard under the bus. All in all, Ben was done in Philly, but the drama continued. The breakup between Ben Simmons and the Philadelphia 76ers was anything but pretty, and it was actually quite sad to see him go from one of Philadelphia's saviors and a big part of the revival of the team to an enemy of the city of brotherly love. Very soon after the 21 playoffs, Simmons' agent Rich Paul met with the team and discussed their future and if they should work out a trade before the season started. The team decided they still wanted to work with Simmons and saw him as a big part of their future. But not even a month later, the trade rumors began to stir up as the Sixers had a very high asking price for the young point guard. They were not trading him unless it was for a superstar level player, preferably someone who was much better offensively and could better complement the big man. But they were prepared to move into the season with Simmons still on the roster. Just a few days later, reports came out and Simmons wanted out. He knew he wasn't wanted by fans, and the organization was less than satisfied with his play and attitude. Maybe fans did run him out of the city. Rumors came out over the summer about Ben cutting off all communication with the team. He did not want anything to do with Philadelphia anymore, and now wanted to be moved. And he did not report to the Sixers media day. The holdout of Ben in his position on the team began. He missed training camp, the first 2 preseason games, the team started to fine him for his absence, and teammates expressed how much they wanted Simmons to return to play, but it was just too late. This ugly circus had already started. Simmons actually did return to the team though, which he has recently claimed was because he was trying to do the right thing. But many people, including myself, just thought it was to likely stop his pockets from being drained from all the fines that were being racked up. He would go on to miss the remaining preseason games despite being cleared to play, health-wise. Continuing the embarrassing unfolding of this unfortunate situation, Ben Simmons was kicked from practice by Doc Rivers on October 19th for not being engaged. Ben has recently claimed he was being targeted. He let Doc know before practice that mentally, he just wasn't ready to play, but Doc put him in anyway. This seemed to be the heights of this extended drama. The team started the season without Ben, and didn't seem to have too much of a problem playing without him, starting the year 8-2. Simmons informed the team early in the season that he was mentally unready to play, which protected him from being fined for missing practices and games because of a clause in the league. 14 days later, the fine started again as Simmons rejected the mental health resources the team offered as he received resources elsewhere. Rich Paul, his agent, did not like the way the team was handling the situation, saying either you help Ben or come out and say he's lying. Which one is it? Despite the team offering resources which were rejected by Ben himself. Paul also claimed the fines and negative publicity furthered Ben's mental health issues. January 12, 2022, the Sixers stood at 23-17, and Rich Paul met with Daryl Morey and Elton Brand in the team's front office. No progress was made regarding Ben's situation. After an exhausting summer and start to the season, and frankly last few years, both sides got what they wanted not even a month later, as Brooklyn's year-deep situation with the big three of Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and newest addition James Harden was not working out, simply put. And after striking out just a season ago, the Philadelphia 76ers were able to bring in the offensive superstar. Harden was a Sixer and Ben Simmons was a Brooklyn Net, with some other guys involved in the deal, as well as some picks. And after being told they were asking for way too much, the 76ers got exactly what they wanted, and an all-time offensive superstar, James Harden. As I said goodbye to the Ben Simmons saga, and it was an ugly one. One of the messiest situations to date in the league was finally over, and both sides got what they wanted. Embiid said he is one of the best players in the league. MVP. It's pretty exciting. You add someone like that, your chances to win a championship get even bigger. And he was right. It was honestly unexpected, and I wasn't sure the 76ers would acquire a satisfactory player after all this time. The immediate response from most NBA fans was that Philly actually lost the trade. Their conversations of Harden being washed up and Philly being robbed started. Kind of funny to hear, honestly. The guy who was terrified to even step on the court versus one of the greatest offensive players not only of this generation, but of all time. But people will go against Philly regardless of if they believe what they're saying or not. This trade gave Philly fans a major boost in confidence and gave the organization the player that they have been feeding for years. They lost Butler, and Harden was a step up, and an even bigger step up from Ben Simmons, despite the opinions of most NBA fans. Right out the gate, Harden showed why the Sixers traded for him. He had 27 points, 12 assists, and 8 boards alongside Embiid in Harden fashion in his debut versus Minnesota. Just a dominant performance, showing he had a lot left in the tank. Harden's first 4 games in the city showed the potential of this duo and this roster. It was beautiful to watch, warmed my heart. It was reassuring. The best duo in the league, plus Tyrese Maxey took a huge jump this season, averaging 17 points on elite efficiency and connecting with the fans like no other. This could be the 76ers' year. Chemistry still needed to be built and game plans fleshed out, but the team gave Embiid a chance to play with a player of an elite caliber and the best player he has ever played with, and one of the league's best duos was formed. But after just 4 games of showing what this duo could bring, Harden's play went downhill and fast. He was nursing a hamstring injury in Brooklyn, and when he was officially traded to the Sixers, he took some time rehabbing before his debut. This hamstring issue seemed to never be fully resolved. James slowed down and was not getting to the rim the same as he was in the past. He was complaining about fouls every possession. Shots were not falling as he struggled to perform versus some of the league's worst teams, and it was concerning. It was clear Harden was not completely healthy and the injuries started to catch up to him. Maybe the few weeks off after landing in Philly gave him a few games of glory, but it obviously wasn't enough. And this directly affected his play. This was not the player the Sixers thought they were trading for, and this continued on into the playoffs. The team ended the season as a 4th seed, as Joel Embiid put up yet another MVP caliber season. He would come in second yet again, but the team had a bigger focus with the Toronto Raptors round 1. A tough, well-coached defensive team who had taken out the Sixers in embarrassing fashion just a few years prior, but this time they didn't have Kawhi Leonard, but Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, the Rookie of the Year Scotty Barnes with Nick Nurse at the helm. This wasn't going to be easy. The first 3 games went to Philadelphia with a 38-point game from Tyrese Maxey. Tobias Harris's steady play and surprising defensive prowess and normal dominance from Joel Embiid topped off with his Game 3 game winner, bringing the series 3-0 Philly. Harden struggled up to this point as he was tested versus a top 10 defense in the league, but Philly just had to close the series out. The Raptors would go on to win Game 4 as their defense bothered Maxey, Harden, and Embiid. Game 5 also went to Toronto as Embiid, Maxey, Harden, and Harris all underperformed. No team has ever blown a 3-0 lead, but if any team were to, it would be the 76ers. And this was a real fear for fans of a team that has been disappointing, and even I didn't put it past them to lose 4 in a row. But luckily they would close out the series Game 6 4-2 as the main 4 all improved with 4 threes from Danny Green. But with 4 minutes on the clock and a blowout, Raptors star Pascal Siakam drives to the rim and elbows Joel Embiid right in the eye. Joel took the blow like a champ, but the blow fractured the right orbital bone in his eye and he was diagnosed with a mild concussion. He was out indefinitely and was expected to miss at least games 1 and 2 in the next round versus the Miami Heat. After some hope was gained after putting away Toronto finally, this tragic turn of events served as the reality check I guess us fans needed. This is the 76ers. They disappoint you. It's what they do. Some players are just injury prone, but this was just unlucky, an orbital fracture, but he would fight to return. By the time he came back though, the 76ers were down 0-2 versus a Jimmy Butler-led Miami team with DeAndre Jordan out there instead of the MVP runner-up. It was disheartening to watch an older DeAndre Jordan instead of the superstar we had been spoiled with. Harden also continued to struggle versus another great defense with a great coach and multiple great defenders. Embiid would have returned in Game 3 as the 76ers took the next 2 games, bringing the series 2-2. The masked Embiid was very obviously bothered by it, and it was unlikely that he was healthy, but yet again he fought hard to compete. And even though he could not be 100% himself, his mere presence on the court was enough to help his team. In Game 4, Harden had his best game in a very long time. Good on him, it was great to see. Everyone raved about how he was back, but the next 2 games proved that way too early declaration to be false, as Philly falls yet again. And Harden had just 2 shots taken in the second half of Game 6, with 0 points. The team was simply outworked, outplayed, and outdesired as Miami just wanted it more. They were pathetic on the rebounds as PJ Tucker along with the rest of the Heat simply out-hustled them. It's hard to believe in your team when they don't believe in themselves. Disappointment. This has been what the 76ers have left us with for years now. But this loss felt different than the others. I didn't care as much. The Sixers losing early in the playoffs is starting to feel like routine, like you're waiting on it. Every loss hurt and some ripped your heart out until you felt nothing. But this loss to the Miami Heat was kind of just whatever. Like, yeah, this is what the team does. They fold. And honestly, as a Sixers fan, it is getting harder to care. There seems to always be something keeping us from winning. Simply not wanting to, players coming up short, 4 bounces, injuries, players coming up short again, and injuries. It's all just part of the Sixers fan experience, and I'm starting to get used to it. And this all ties into the beginning of this video. James Harden has gotten into better shape. There are talks of this really being our year. The roster has improved, but will any of this really matter? We have heard this story before. The team has not given us a reason to believe, but I guess we shall see. So far, they've been just okay this season, but there is still time. They've always had the personnel, same as this year, but they must execute and want it, which they haven't in the past. All in all, the Sixers have disappointed me more times than not, and I've grown numb. But hopefully this can all change this season. What do you think? Am I being dramatic? Has it not really been that bad? Am I a bad Sixers fan for making this video? Will the franchise that is the Philadelphia 76ers turn it around and bring a championship to the city once again? We shall see. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. This has been the sad story of the Philadelphia 76ers. Thank you guys for watching. This has been Rxkz with Hoops Times 2. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more content like this, and hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. Peace out.